Okay, so you've suffered your data breach, and you're getting closer to what you think is it's likely to be a notifiable data breach. And so we start considering the data breach notification laws. And so basically in 2022, after the Optus and during the Medibank breach, the government brought in the Privacy Legislation Amendment Bill for 2022. And basically that took fines from, I think it was $2.2 million back then, and increased them up to, so for serious or repeated privacy breaches, the fines are the greater of $50 million or 3 times the benefit obtained from the breach. So if there was a benefit to the organization from the breach, sounds a bit strange, but it's a bit abstract as to what that may mean. But it can mean things like if you've collected a lot of PII data unnecessarily and you've stored it for a long time, if you've obtained benefits of having that, then you can actually, if they can quantify what those benefits are, the fine can be 3 times what those benefits are. But that's a bit, it seems a bit fuzzy as to what those benefits could be. And if they can't determine what the benefit is, then 30% of the adjusted turnover of the company during the breach period, which is a minimum of 12 months. So 30% of your turnover for 12 months, which can obviously be pretty substantial, right? So we're now facing very similar fines to, in Europe around the GDPR, which has been, forced upon a lot of companies over the years. And GDPR also applies to Australian organisations as well. So if you have European citizens' data leaked during a security breach, then you may also come under GDPR and potentially get fines from that. So now that we know what the fines are, we also tend to get asked the question, well, who do we actually need to notify and when do we need to notify them? When should we notify them? Right, so a lot of people think that you need to notify the ACSC, which you don't. The ACSC is more of a government cybersecurity help desk who obviously has connections into some of the government agencies like the AFP and things like that, so that they can get access to intelligence relating to threat actors and, be able to provide additional information. But they're not the ones who you need to notify. The OAIC is the one that you need to be notifying, and also your customers. So your customers only need to be notified if they're affected by the breach to begin with, but only where the breach is likely to result in serious harm to the individuals. So, and again, a little bit subjective, but the OAIC or the ACSC can provide guidance around some of that. The timeframes that you need to be working towards is 30 days. So once you've detected that a breach has happened, you've got 30 days to be able to notify the OAIC that you've suffered a security breach or a notifiable data breach. Right, so even though there is a 30-day deadline, in reality, when an investigation's going on, yes, you might see that, a threat actor's talking to you saying, hey, I've got, 100 gigs of your data, and you can see evidence that, yes, we've had a spike in, data going outbound from a particular server, for example. But that doesn't tell you what data has actually been stolen, right? So there was one higher education organisation that we dealt with who had a security breach. They could see through their firewalls that a large amount of data was going out. But because they didn't know what data had gone out, their internal legal team decided that they would not notify the OAIC because they couldn't say that it was a notifiable data breach, which isn't incorrect. But based on the system, I think it was probably a brave call. So even though when you're doing an investigation, you're actually in the same position where you don't know what data's been taken, and sometimes these investigations, depending upon how big they are, can take some time to actually go through, and identifying what data has been stolen is not the first priority. It's very important. The first priority is to regain control over your environment and make sure that you've evicted the threat actor. Because if you don't do that, they can come back and get more data, or they come back and put more backdoors around, and you have to start the investigation again. And you're constantly chasing your tail. So first kicking them out, and then once you've got control of the environment, then start having a look at what sort of data is happening. In reality, a lot of these happen in parallel at different phases. So we'll quite often be negotiating with the threat actor or talking with the threat actor to get little bits of information, which we'll talk about in a second. So one of the landmines that we do come across is one, notifying the OAIC too early. Just to be proactive, and you're trying to look good. But what that does is their first question back is, have you notified your clients, your customers? And you don't even know what data's been stolen yet, right? So you say, no, we haven't done that yet. And, you start to have that pressure on you to try and get answers once you engage the OAIC. I can tell you right now that these are quite often very emotional situations. We've seen multiple CEOs crying on the floor, off the back of these. We've had people having panic attacks, and it's very, very stressful, very emotive situation. And, the last thing you want is having the government putting more pressure on yourself and your team to be able to deliver. So that's one landmine, just to, notify them when you're ready to notify them. You do have that full 30 days. The other thing is, you can get to the 30 days and say, look, we are not ready to notify. We're letting you know this has happened. We don't know if it's a notifiable data breach yet, because we're still analysing. We're still trying to get the list of files from the threat actor. We're still trying to analyse the data to see, what PII information has been leaked, through the security breach. The other one where people notify too early is customers. So if you don't know, so we had one customer who went and they suffered a breach. They could see what system was breached. They went and notified all of the customers, within that system that they had been breached. Tried to be proactive and do the right thing. As the investigation continued and we were able to talk with the threat actor and get more information, in that case, we actually bought some of the data so that we could actually see how much data, which customers were actually stolen, because we suspected it was much less than what was actually in the entire system. And we found that only 20% of the customer data had been stolen. And so by notifying the customers too early, they've actually notified 80% of their customers telling them they've been breached when they actually haven't, and they've had to go back and say, "Hey, actually, no, you didn't get breached," but then you've already suffered the reputational damage associated with that.